Hello and welcome to the latest edition of The Talking Point with Chris, Jack and Stevie Clifford. Thank you for joining us once again as we take an in-depth look at one of the big issues on or off the field at Ibrox. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, the best way to support us here at the Rangers Review is by signing up to the website to read the best Rangers journalism. With the plug out the way, Stevie, how are we?
Yeah, fine. Another interesting episode ahead, I think, and relevant. We do it on this one, considering it is now a year since we sat Chris and welcomed him. Let's just go straight into it. You were at that press conference last year. I had missed it. I was on holiday, and you were there. What did you make of Philippe Clement, and how did you feel about it at the time?
Given that you weren't there, I'm surprised Rangers didn't actually rearrange it. So just to appoint the manager a week later, so you were back from your holiday. No, as you say, he had that first press at Ibrox. Had the Blue Room unveiling, sat alongside James Bisgrove, and I have to say I thought he came across well that day. We had obviously covered him extensively on the site in terms of his successes in Belgium, his failure, if you like, at Monaco. Josh had done a lot of work on his style of play and how he would set a side up. We spoke to former players, we had spoken to former staff of his, but until you actually sit down in front of someone and you get to ask him questions and you see how he answers questions, I think importantly for a Rangers manager, how he handles himself as well. Now, there's that X factor, I think, with a Rangers manager. It's perhaps quite hard to put into words, but you think of successful Rangers managers, they carry themselves in a certain way. They have a certain presence about them, and that's the same as Jock Wallace or Walter or Souness. Big Ek had that. Steven Gerrard had that. The less successful ones, you think back to Pedro, for example, or Graham Murphy, for example, they didn't carry themselves in the same way. And I thought that day Clement was more like the type of character that you expect from a Rangers manager. I thought he spoke well, didn't really chuck anything, but from memory he must have sat about half an hour or so and went through quite a lot of aspects of how he wanted to set the side up. There was obviously the usual, I'm delighted to be here, and the Rangers fans are great, and Ibrox is great, all the stuff that we usually get. But I thought as an unveiling presser goes, it was good, and I thought it gave us a bit of insight into the type of manager that Rangers had appointed, because it had also been not a hugely drawn out process, but it had ticked on for a couple of weeks after it became evident for quite some time, obviously, that Michael Beale was falling off and that his tenure would come to an end. Thoughts had clearly turned to who was next long before it had to come to the stage of actually finding it. It was pitched as Muscat against Clement. And I have to say, I wasn't overly disappointed when Clement got the job. I thought that was the right job, or the right choice at that time.
Interesting, because he started off pretty well. First win 4-0, I think, on day one, more or less, against Hibs. That win against Hearts in the last couple of minutes when they were 1 down heading into 87, 88 minutes. Tav equaliser from penalty spot, and then Danilo. And then they got a bit of momentum. December went well. They managed to get the League Cup, albeit Celtic were out, and we had to just negotiate, Hearts in the semi and then Aberdeen in the final. Then we had that night in Betis. His first couple of months, he was unbeaten. I think he won 7 or 8 in a row, and he was doing some pretty good things. Like, the team were looking refreshed, and it was encouraging.
Mm-hmm. I think there was quite a lot to like in those first few weeks. You've also written a column for the site on this particular subject as well. And I think now you make the point of that first couple of months. They were playing some good stuff because the first few weeks of the season, I was under Beale, it had been that bad. You always expected that new manager bounce, and regardless of who came in, as long as they were not completely inept, you would have expected any manager, and certainly one with Clement's track record, to get more of a tune out of the squad. I think the big thing in that first couple of weeks, he spoke about the synergy. I think that was the word that he used between the team and the support. I think he was able to kind of bring that back. I think a lot of the fans still had doubts about a number of those players. We'll come on to talk about that towards the end as well, in terms of how the squad basically got rebuilt. But he was able to just give the fans, I think, something to believe in again. Because when Michael Beale left, we spoke about it. We had it on the morning briefing. Very, very few people believed that Rangers could salvage anything from that season. You looked at the League Cup after that win over Hearts, as you mentioned, thought, well, there's no reason why they shouldn't go on and win it. Scottish Cup was there to be won, but no guarantee, obviously, as turned out to be the case. Very, very few people believed there was a Premiership title challenge in Rangers, and certainly not the kind of result and performance that they were able to get in. Betis was over there for that game, working for Rangers Review alongside Derek, and at that point,
did you enjoy that? Did you?
It was really good. You should have been there. that really was I think that was the high point of the season so far. Coming off the back of a win at Hampden, or to win something at Hampden and have a European result in such close proximity, it felt at that time that Rangers were perhaps actually onto something.
Yeah, I remember as well. I think it was Christmas Eve, possibly around about Christmas, going to Motherwell, and they made really light work of a Motherwell team that were kind of flying at the time as well, very quickly 2-0 up. I'm pretty sure that was Dowell and Cantwell scored that day, I think, possibly, and we were playing some good
goals really early on.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. We're playing some good stuff. So we head into New Year, Chris. We go to Parkhead and contrive, I think, to miss some unbelievable chances, give away some terrible goals, get back in the game, get a man sent off, and still contrive to miss some terrible chances. That felt like an opportunity missed, but the other way to look at it was there's progress there, because we did hurt them and we did at least get close to them. But instead of that gap shortening, it seems to have went the other way again. How much of an issue is it? He's had five shots at Celtic now, possibly 6 shots at Celtic, and he's not managed to get a result. Culminating, obviously, Scottish Cup defeat, which was, again, a good performance, chances missed. And then a couple of weeks ago, a bit of a hiding. Where are you with that? And how difficult is lack of result against them?
I think it's a huge question mark that hangs over them at present. Again, we'll come on to speak about the style of play and some of the signings, but ultimately, a Rangers manager that cannot beat Celtic is no use as a Rangers manager. So that's your reason for being here, is to win trophies, to win leagues. If you're going to win trophies and win leagues, you have to be able to beat Celtic. You're not going to be able to lift the Premiership title losing 4-0 firm games. You're not going to be able to win domestic cups if at some stage, more regular than not, you're going to go up against Celtic. He has to find a way, has to find a style, has to find a tactical approach, has to recruit the players that are capable of doing that. I thought you can almost the early ones you perhaps give them a pass in. I thought that was, as you say, a slightly more encouraging Parkhead performance. Also a bit of controversy after it, but no, there always is after Old Firm games. For me, the Ibrox game later on, again, that we'll touch on, was more of a red flag. The Scottish Cup final, again, an encouraging performance, but you can't get over the line. You can't keep doing that. It's fine getting closer, but ultimately Rangers have to get further than that, because if they want to win titles, they have to be able to beat Celtic. And I think that the Ibrox game showed that, because by that stage they had done a lot of the hard work. They had done really well. I think at that stage the manager's his stock was fairly high amongst the fans after a really encouraging run post Parkhead. We come to Motherwell at Ibrox in March. You turn up, it's 3 points and up the road. It's one more game ticked off on the road to a potential title. Didn't quite unfold that way. Theo Bear ran ragged. Rangers were really off it, really flat that day. And I think post-match we all thought it's a blip. They'll recover from it. It'll be fine. It didn't turn out to be a blip. It turned out to be the beginning of the end almost.
Yeah, and they'd hammered Hearts the week before, went to Kilmarnock during the week. But something happened in that Kilmarnock game that people didn't realise the gravity of it. At the time against Hearts at home, you'll remember that Diamandi started to click, Cortez started to click, Dessers was in good form, Redvan at that moment at left back was powering about and he was different. And there was an energy and a vibe to the team that perhaps wasn't there before. Sima was coming back in the coming weeks and everybody was on a high and it was looking okay. A couple of things happened against Kilmarnock. One, it took a hell of a lot of them out of them. They lost Cortez and Redvan in that game. Or Redvan was injured thereabout, but both of them weren't available. And basically that took the win completely out of their sails. And I think that Motherwell game was the end for Connor Goldson. I think certainly we didn't recover. We did go to 1-1 and then lost another inexplicable goal at the back post. And it just all... But I remember that day missing so many chances. Last 10 minutes, I think we had 4 or 5 corners where John Souttar and Connor Goldson both missed glaring headers. Liam Kelly had a couple of reasonably good saves. But I think that day we did kind of put it down to a blip, and especially the fact Celtic got beat the following day at Tynecastle. A Lawrence Shankland-inspired 2-0 victory, if I remember rightly. And, you kind of thought we're going to get away with it. But the truth is, Chris, that knocked the confidence and the wind out of them to a point where they didn't really recover. Europe then came into play. Benfica, they were obviously close, managed to get a great result out there. And it's worth saying, I think Clement's now, 5 away games, I think he is, in Europe, and he's unbeaten. That was another good result, 2-2 out there. And then we come to Ibrox in that game and give away the most inexplicable goal, if you remember, from our own attacking corner. And then we were kind of dead on our feet. And I think that took a lot out of us. What went wrong? I think it's easy for us. Like, at the time, there was a lot of people getting carried away. And I don't know if people remember, I was fairly relaxed about it all because I expected this squad and the certain individuals that we had to do what they always did. And to an extent, they did. And we ended up where we were. And the truth is that Celtic know how to get over the line. They have the squad, the experience, the players for it. We didn't know how to get over the line, and we didn't know how to win those games. So when it came to April, Chris, I think by that point, psychologically, the damage was done. We were running a bit on empty. The players they didn't have that difference maker. Now, I'm not saying that Cortez or Redvan were difference makers, but the thing was they were different to what we actually had in the team at the time, and they were playing really well. To take them out on the left-hand side was a hammer blow. James Tavernier on the other side, performances had begun to wane quite a bit, and that attacking prowess had more or less gone. Cyril Dessers is what he always is, a hit and a miss. So when it comes to it, we just didn't have enough. And that's the truth. Fabio Silva, etc. He might count his loan as a success. I certainly don't. And it's just things like that. It just didn't work. We just didn't have that wee bit extra that we maybe would have needed. We didn't have that one player who was on form for those closing months. If you look at 55, over the Christmas period, we had Arfield and Roof go on a tremendous run, and then they faded off, and Morelos came right into form. Really good in the New Year game against Celtic where we won 1-0 with the own goal by McGregor. He caused the red card. Then he goes to Aberdeen, scores, goes to Hibs, scores, carries the team, scores at Parkhead. Somebody needed to step up and have those moments. Even if you look back on title-winning teams under Smith, Lafferty came to the fore. Under McLeish, De Boer came to the fore. And these are different quality type of players, understand that. But we had nobody that was prepared to say, right, okay, next few months, I need to step my game up, win the important games for the club. And I think the fact that James Tavernier couldn't do it is a wee bit of a sign of where he is at this moment. But that's basically what it was, Chris. It just went flat really quickly, and there was nobody able to raise the game that extra bit, to give them that extra bit of impetus, in my opinion.
I think that it's an interesting debate of where do you apportion the blame, because you think back to the Old Firm game, Ibrox, Arsenal, Matondo scores that goal late on, and yes, I think everyone was pleased to rescue a point, but when the emotion of that calmed down and you actually sat down, you realised it was a game that Rangers had to win. You then have the Ross County game and the Dundee game, just for any Rangers side going for a title, both of them completely unacceptable. But where do you apportion the blame for those ones? Is it the players not being able to handle the pressure, not being able to step up, or does the manager take his share of the responsibility? I thought, especially after the Dundee game, post-match press conference, I can remember being in the Dens Park press room that night, and it was clearly hadn't gone well for Rangers. Manager comes in, says what he says afterwards, gives his interview, and the guys almost just like looked at each other as if to say, have we just watched the same game? Have we called this completely wrong? Because it was so far outside of what we thought we had just watched and what we had just watched. Those games in particular, wheels came off. After that, Rangers not going to win the league. Missed opportunity against Celtic. Those 5 drop points. Was it the players? Was it the manager? Does everyone have to take their share of the responsibility for that?
Yeah, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. The 3-3 draw at Ibrox was disappointing because the first half was atrocious. But they did at least roar back. I think Tav gets one back, doesn't he? And then Desser scores unfairly chopped out. But they kept going. Seema equalises. Inexplicably, 40 seconds later, they're 3-2 down. And then they do grab an equaliser for 3-3. And you think at the time, okay, you're still in it. And it's still in your hands, which it was. The issue goes up to Ross County. The players, were really poor. Sunday morning kickoff, really, really grim. Another thing happened that day. I don't know if you remember this. We were 1-0 up at half-time, but Ross County had been all over us that first half. I think that's fair to say. Danda was causing all sorts of problems on the right-hand side. He was doubling up, and I think they had a couple off the line, and they were really close. And I remember going in at half-time, and every one of us was saying, you need to change the midfield. It's getting swamped. We're far too easy to play against. We're far too easy to break against. Does that sound familiar?
You may have mentioned that somewhat recently. Right.
So this is where I started to question him. Half-time came and went, and within 15, 20 minutes, they were 3-1 down, and the season was gone. Then he changed it. I think then John Lundstrom possibly came on, or there was a change. I can't quite remember who came on, but it was too late. And went into Dundee, and we were dreadful. I thought we were flat. I think we hit the post or something quite early on. Possibly Seema hit the post quite early on in about 10 minutes or so. He went in, I think, the right-hand side. There was either that, there was a good save. But aside of that, I don't remember anything. I remember, again, being very open without Dundee doing too much. 0-0, league over. It required you to go to Parkhead to win to even stay in it. And I just think that, one, nobody stepped up from the playing squad, which I've already said. But two, it was a case of we'll just keep going and hope that somebody does. There wasn't really any tactical changes. There wasn't really anything there. And we just kind of ran out of steam altogether, I think. I think that's quite clear. Who takes the blame? Well, the squad aren't good enough. So we've been put in that position by previous transfer windows and a slow decline over 3 years to the point where he took over a squad that was dead in the water and needed urgent fixing. And two, he didn't. Either one, he didn't change it because he felt he couldn't, or two, he didn't change it because he was too stubborn in his ways. Either way, it didn't work. So what went wrong? Did people start to question Clement? Yeah, I think they did. I certainly did. I think at that point, after the Ross County game, I remember driving up the road and thinking, yeah, that's a really difficult one to change your opinion on. So, yeah, a difficult a difficult day, that one. I think that's clear. And definitely for me, Chris, I started to ask questions. But the season, it does peter out, doesn't it? Because that defeat at Parkhead, I think at that point, definitely everybody wanted to see the back of this squad. I think that's fair. With regards to Clement, do you think he deserved a chance at that point? Had he shown enough with the cup win, the big win in Betis and things like that? Do you think there was enough there?
I think just about, but I'm not any more than 55-45 in that favour. I think it would have been a really big call, and it was never going to happen. The club were not going to just a few months in decide, sorry, this is not the direction we're going to change. We're going to change manager. He was always going to get that transfer window and get this rebuild. I think, as you say, I think a lot of people, they didn't really know what to expect at the start. Come pre-Motherwell in March, I think he had a lot of credit in the bank. I think looking back, he did, and he was always going to get it. It would have been a big call, and I don't think the board were ever going to make that call to change manager, despite the way that Rangers had fallen apart in the title race, despite losing another Old Firm game, despite not winning the Scottish Cup. I didn't expect them to change the manager at that stage. I didn't expect them to sign a new contract either. It has to be said. I think if you look back at the various phases of Clement, people were, I think, fairly excited when he came in. Now, they wanted to see what he could do. He had a track record. They had won titles before. Come March, pre-Motherwell, I think I had quite a lot of credit in the bank, as we've spoken about with the Betis result in the League Cup, getting Rangers back into the title race. That credit then is then steadily whittled away over the weeks and through those results that we've touched on. I don't think he had a lot left in the tank by the summer, but he was always going to get the chance to go and fix it. He was always going to go and get the rebuild. Did that rebuild go as expected? Was it deep enough in terms of the players that left? Was it good enough in terms of players that came in? We're now also a couple of months on from the transfer window closing, and my view of the squad now is roughly the same as it was when that window closed. It's just not quite there. It's not quite good enough. On the flip side, you could say it was never going to be a one-summer fix. You look at a number of players that had to leave. You look at how the squad has been reprofiled in terms of age and experience, certainly in terms of the wage bill, several £1 million coming out of it. It was never going to be a quick fix. It's whether you still have that belief that Clement is the right manager. It comes back to the question I asked you just a few minutes ago. Is it on the manager or is it on the players? They were not ready for the start of this season. That draw at Tynecastle looks even worse now than it was at the time, given Hearts' fortune since. Dynamo Kiev, I think, were there to be beaten, but Rangers were not in a position to do so. The business that had to be done early wasn't able to be done in terms of the number 10 position, and certain other players coming into the squad because they couldn't get guys out the door until late on, so you have to have a wee bit of sympathy there for them. But Rangers were not ready for this season. They were nowhere near good enough at Parkhead. I think his comments after that, saying, no, we had the biggest result, referencing the Ross County game. Again, that was a big red flag for a lot of people. And I think Rangers they are where a lot of people expected them to be at this stage. Not quite good enough, trailing in the title race, out of the Champions League. And I don't think it's a massive surprise that they are where they are, and are now heading into this run after the international break, back down at Kilmarnock, a hugely significant venue for Rangers over recent seasons. Pittodrie coming up at the end of the month. How would you rank the progress this season, or where are Rangers compared to where you expected them to be at this stage?
I think, see, on the summer, I think that I need to make a point that we asked for a total rebuild, Chris. We asked for these players that we didn't want in the team to be put out. We asked for root and branch change, more or less. I feel that he's done that. I mean, the amount of players that he allowed to leave, Jack, Barisic, Lundstrom, Connor Goldson, there was a hell of a big change in there. And even when you look at the fabric, the likes of McCrory's and stuff like that, a lot of players left. A lot of players come in. We asked for a change of philosophy. We asked for younger, brighter players to come in, which we got. And I feel that was always going to take time. Should they have been ready for the start of the season? Yes, I think it was. I think as much as we can say it was too slow, I think we also have to say that they did, in traditional fashion, make a bit of a meal of it. So I think that's all fair. And I think you can say that the things he's done could be quite bright. Like in terms of Jeffy being a good player, Barron being a good player. I think that Bayrami's going to be a really good player. There's players in there that you can say, right, okay, that's fine. There's others, Robin Proper, who maybe has to prove a wee bit more. There's, the Cortez, there's big question marks over his kind of fitness. And he was coming in as one of your brightest prospects, and he's been unlucky. Now we're getting told that's a long-term one. So in terms of where we are now and on the summer, over the course of it, I understood what he was trying to do. I think that's probably important to say. I understood his kind of angle, understood what he was trying, understood that whole point of view. But did it work out perfectly? I'm not really sure it did. Did it kind of, we can, it's easy because we can judge it now and it's not went perfectly. But I'm not sure that I can overly criticise him because he done more or less what we asked him to do on a shoestring budget with barely any money. It's whether or not in 6 months' time we can say for sure Jeffy's work, Cortez's work, Eagleman's work. That's where he's going to really be telling. And this is almost like a job that was going to take more than one window. But the problem with saying that is this isn't PSV and it isn't Coppin's time there. It isn't, Bruges where he had time and maybe not as much expectancy as he has now. He's expected to do that and win games immediately. So the start was poor, like you said, where Hearts was a bit of a damp squib. Kiev came and went when we probably should have beaten them.
Mm-hmm.
And Celtic was just a complete nightmare. But the other games, we've more or less passed them comfortably enough. 8 clean sheets in 13 isn't a fluke. So, there's pros and cons to everything. I think my biggest thing is that I think there's still a lot of questions over his structure and how we set up. And I think you can say that and be realistic about the job he had to do. I think that's fine. But also question it a wee bit where you're like, well, that could still be better, that could be different. So I'm not in the camp where I want him out. I think that would be, and I think especially given the current situation around the club at the moment where the board is sparsely populated and there's executive leaving and things like that, I think losing Philippe Clement at this time would be particularly damaging and worrying. I mean, not to mention who would replace him, or who would decide who would replace him would be the biggest worry. But Chris, I think that this was always going to be a slow burner, whether we like it or not. The question is whether or not Philippe Clement can he do enough that he basically manages. Can he do enough that he manages to pick up silverware somewhere? I think that's maybe the issue with it that I would question, and got to hope that he does somehow. So
I think we'll finish on an easy one for
it's
both of us.
it's a tricky one though, isn't it? Because I've asked him, and I wanted big change. I wanted a new philosophy. I wanted younger players in. He's given us that on a very small budget. Only in 6 months' time will we be able to truly say, are those players working?
Mm-hmm.
But on the same time, you can argue that on the pitch, it's not really working. It's all a bit meh. It's all a bit kind of, and it's not like it's terribly bad, because they are beating 8 clean sheets in 13. But it always seems like when they come to the slightly more difficult games, then they're not quite up to it. Celtic thrashed us quite easily. Kiev, you could argue that the red card changed everything. I think it did. And I'm loath to overly go in on them, but I think it's fair to say things could be better, play could be better, structure could be better, and I think that's fair. Is it fair?
I think that actually brings on to the final point I wanted to raise with you now. The criticism that the manager is getting from some quarters does. Now you mentioned the boardroom and the executive stuff there. Does the criticism towards the club as a whole and towards, I say, board and execs and the general malaise, I think, in between fan Rangers relations, does that shield the manager a wee bit because people perhaps then not looking as closely at him, or does it make it worse for him because people are actually taking out their overall frustrations solely on the manager? And I'm asking you that question, not really knowing what side of the fence I'm on. I think it's probably a bit of both. So I think he does take more stick because of, say, the general feeling, I think, amongst the support at present. But I think, as we've outlined over the last half hour, there are good things, there have been red flags, there are negatives of Clement. But the point that you touched on there, right now he is the figure of stability at the club because there's so much change elsewhere. It would need to go really, really badly for him to not be Rangers manager in the short term. Will he be Rangers manager? Are we having this conversation this time next year, celebrating his second anniversary at Ibrox?
I think the next month or so, Chris, is really, really key and really pivotal. We go Killie, don't we? And then we go Bucharest. We have Aberdeen away, St Mirren, I think, in between them as well. And then you go Motherwell in the Cup. So within 5 or 6 games, culminating, I think, Hearts at home, and then we go on an international break again. This block of games will tell you a few things. One, are they still in the League Cup? So will they get to their first final of the season? Fingers crossed. 2, where are they in the Europa? Because if we want to really progress, Bucharest is a game that you have to win, even if they've got 6 points out of 6. Now, arguably, if you end up with 6 points out of 9, that's a good start. So he's achieving in Europe. He's through to a final. The key thing is Kilmarnock, St Mirren, Aberdeen, and Hearts. It has to be 12 points out of 12, and that's really difficult because then you're looking at a clean sweep of, I think, 6 victories out of 6, 4 in the league, your League Cup, your European game, Chris. With a squad that is still learning, it's still adapting, it's still getting to where he wants us to be. Remember, he said October, November time is when you'll see the best of us. But you can't suddenly just click your fingers and we're magically beating teams 5-0. How do you stop Cyril Dessers missing chances? How do you stop players overplaying? How do you stop the team setup being so wide open and things like that? Just magically, I don't think you can. And that's his biggest thing. We both know that if this 6 games goes wrong, regardless of what's happening off the pitch, he'll probably get it tighter because of the frustrations of the fans elsewhere. If he does well in these 6 games, I think the attention might go more on you're starting then to head towards AGM time and everything else. I think focus might shift. But I think it's a really key time for him, Chris. I don't know what you think, but I think it's a really key time for him. If we can, minimum you're looking for 10 points out of 12, victory in the League Cup, victory in Europe. If you want to have a successful season, would you take a point at Pataudry? No, but you want to avoid defeat, don't you? And I think if he got to the end of it 10 points out of 12 and through these games, it would be disappointing, but it wouldn't be the worst. But I just think that somehow with this squad, and I think that 6 wins is a lot. Like, I think that's really difficult. I'm not saying I can't see it, and I would want any other time Rangers normally to be 6 wins out of 6, but I just think that this wee period for him is going to decide where or how the fans react. I think that's fair.
I think that sums it up. Now we'll have another couple of shows over the next couple of weeks, and the mood of those shows and the mood of the support, it's going to be determined by result to result, by performance to performance. I think you lay out those 6 games. For me, anything less than 6 wins causes Rangers big problems. You would perhaps I know the manager always says he wants to win everything, he wants to win every game. If you were to offer me 5 wins, I would sacrifice the Bucharest game and say, well, the Europa League's perhaps, in terms of priorities, not top of that list. The fear is they drop anything else domestically. Also, the Motherwell game cost them a shot at silverware. Anything else in terms of the Premiership, I just don't see Rangers being able to draw that back. I know this time this season they were a number of points behind and managed to get back into it. That's not going to happen every season. This Celtic squad is not going to make the same mistakes they did last season. So I think, as you've outlined there, this next tranche of fixtures heading into the next international break, it's going to have such a longer term impact, both on and off the pitch at Ibrox. As we've said, Rangers back in action down at Rugby Park this weekend. We will have full press conference, news and reaction on the YouTube channel, also full Q&As and interviews on the website, and of course the Rangers Review YouTube and the website is the best place to follow all the news, all the opinion, all the analysis of what, as Stevie and I have said, will be a very interesting next couple of weeks for Rangers and Philippe Clement. So once again, thank you for your support, and we'll see you again soon.